In 1929, during an interview with the Saturday Evening Post, mathematician and physicist Albert Einstein had this to say about imagination. I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination encircles the world. Our world is fueled by imagination. It permeates our entire world and inserts itself into everything that we do, whether it is for innovation, the arts, technology, entertainment, design, or frankly, just getting through the day. It's a powerful elixir. One of the ways that we express our imagination is through storytelling. We are hardwired to create, tell, and absorb stories. And through our immersion in storytelling, we learn to make sense of our world and to connect with characters whose lives may be very different from our own. Whether it be through the oral words, through books, through films, virtual reality, or avatars, we get to stand in their shoes, see what they see, bear witness to their hopes, their dreams, their histories, and their imaginations. But that's not all. Through storytelling, we can expand our ability to empathize and sympathize. We can also render the other and the different as human, as being more like us. And in so doing, we can learn more about who we are and this world that we live in. I am drawn to speculative fiction films, in particular, science fiction and fantasy. For in these worlds, we not only get to play with our world here on Earth, but we get to play with the entire multiverse. We get to explore people and ideas, and allegorically, we can explore the past, the present, and the future, and examine the myths and the systems that help to shape and program our world. One of my favorite science fiction writers is Octavia Butler, and she talks about being drawn to science fiction in particular because there are no boundaries, that there's no human condition that she could not explore. Today, our speculative fiction films harness the power of innovation, imagination, and immersiveness like we've never seen before. They are creating extraordinary, magical worlds. But what might we ask of our science fiction and speculative fiction and fantasy films that goes beyond the special effects and how they seduce and woo us? I think that it is to stop our own self-censorship. We tend to force our speculative fiction films into a very, very narrow space. Yes, we can imagine a woman who is the mother of dragons, and we can imagine children who are sent to school to learn how to cast magical spells. We delight in the delicious world of aliens and dragons and interdimensional travel. But we have a very hard time imagining people of color as the heroes in these kinds of stories. And we have a very difficult time imagining Black women, African American women, and women of color in these kinds of stories. Oftentimes, when I'm looking at a science fiction or fantasy film, I find myself thinking, did I miss a prequel or a sequel that explains why and how all the people of color were eliminated from the planet Earth? Do you remember the original Star Trek? We knew who was going to die because we hadn't seen them before. They were the anonymous, interchangeable, disposable extra. Now, one argument that's often given, particularly for fantasy films, why we don't see people of color, is that the stories are based on ancient Nordic and medieval European cultures. But a cursory look at history shows that there were diverse populations living during the Middle Ages, a time period that is not specific to Western Europe. I want to be clear that my argument here is not about numbers. It's not about how many people of color were in a particular, how many films during a particular year, although numbers do tell a story. And it's not about diversity as it relates to how many people of color of a particular race appear in a film to represent race as a social construct. It's about these people actually being in the stories that are about them. Why do I say that? There are people of color all around the world who write speculative fiction and fantasy, and somehow they manage to keep their black and brown characters interesting and alive. There are also white writers of this genre who create really complex characters of color. However, when these characters and stories are translated to films, we often see that the characters are cast with white actors. What's also interesting is that those stories hold on to themes that very much are part of the lives of people of color around the world. Enslavement and persecution, for example. We need to do better. Yes? We need to do better. And so I've been thinking about, in my own art practice, how I wanted to approach speculative fiction. And I began to think about this, I think, specifically for two reasons. One, it's been absent for a long time, but also for many years at my academic home, Spelman College, I taught a course called Cinemythic Journey, Black Woman as Hero in American Cinema. At the end of the course, I would ask students, what kind of films would you like to see? Hands down, for over a decade, they would say, more science fiction and fantasy films with women of color. And so with this in mind, I began to, once again, explore these genres. And this reminds me that the world looks different depending upon who is telling the story. This is an image from my film, Her Adventure. In this film, what I was thinking of was, what if there were a parallel universe with a planet that was run by women? And what if the health and well-being of this planet was connected to the health and well-being of women and girls on Earth? And what if there were a reluctant hero in training who discovered this connection and as a result became a superhero? The clip that I am about to show you is where the main character, Her, is being tested by her sister, Zira, who was a commander of an elite group of warrior women who helped to protect the planet and also mine for energy that they hope will help to save and heal their planet. Here, Her inadvertently unleashes the dark force that is destroying the planet.
I had forgotten. How beautiful.
You've come far in your glove bearer training, Her. You have far to go still, but I have something for you.
My own?
Temporary. I want you to help with the harvest. Practice your skills.
I can't. I'm not ready yet.
I can't hold your hand the entire way, Her. You have to stand for something if you ever want to join these honored ranks. Before you extract any life force for harvest, check the energy reading on your glove. That's enough. All of you, focus. Get back to work. Force. It's corrupted. Glove bearers on my signal. Hold. Hold. Now! Eliminate!
Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Toni Morrison said, "If there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written, you must be the one to write it." This has stayed with me through much of my life, which is why I made the film Her Adventure, along with my daughter, who plays the character Her, and also serves as the film's producer. In my current work as a digital media artist, particularly work with the still image, I am again thinking about speculative fiction, in particular fantasy here, what we see and what we don't see. For some of you, these images may seem unfamiliar, and that's okay. And for others, they may feel slightly familiar because you recognize the codes for creating certain kinds of archetypes for fantasy. I would say, for me, we rarely get to see these kinds of images in our visual spaces. They are images of women of color, mostly seasoned women, and we seldom, if ever, hear from them. I think that speculative fiction is about the art of the possible. It has the ability to inspire audiences to be in deep-level, engaging conversations around all forms of the other and the different. That we can engage in a deeper level of storytelling, yes, still using synthetic humans and mythical characters and superheroes, and also people of color on Earth and in the multiverse. As creative people, as members of a creative community, we already know how to break boundaries. We already know how to see beyond and make the possible possible. It's who we are. It's built into our DNA. It is now time to move down the road less traveled, to breathe new life into our imagination, and to dig deeper into our own humanity. This is how I believe we can make a contribution to making the world a better place. Thank you.